Good evening, everyone. I think we're ready to get started. We have all of our candidates. So will you please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Oh, those lights are also.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome to the League of Women Voters of the Hamptons primary election debate among the 5 individuals who are vying for the Democratic Party nomination in the election of the representative of the 1st Congressional District of New York State. The candidates in alphabetic order are Kate Browning, Elaine DeMasi, Perry Gershon, David Pashevsky, and Vivian Veloria Fisher. This primary election will be on Tuesday, June 26th. My name is Kathy Peacock, and I'll be the moderator for this evening. We want to start by thanking Hampton Bays School District and its personnel for their assistance in organizing this event, and for all the students from Hampton Bays who are here. This debate is being filmed by CTV for repeated broadcasts in its entirety before June 26th. Only the League has the right to arrange for the taping and/or recording of this debate. There will be no other taping or recording. Let me introduce the others with roles tonight. The panel who will be asking the questions are Judy Samuelson of the League and Brendan O'Reilly, features editor of the Press News Group. Barbara McClancy of the League is the timer. She's sitting in the front row. League members Carol Meller and Susan Wilson will be screening the questions to avoid duplication, to ensure that they're issues-based and that they pertain to all the candidates. High school students Ricardo Hangier, I'm not going to get that right, and Morgan Long, and other League members are in the aisles to pick up questions you might have for the candidates. Raise your hand and they'll pick them up and deliver them to the screeners. A word from about the League. The League of Women Voters is a trusted, nonpartisan, political, national organization. While we never endorse any candidates or parties, we're directly involved in the many issues important to keeping our communities strong. We're respected for the work we do, sponsoring candidate debates, and for preparing and distributing educational materials on voting issues. You can pick up absentee ballots, voter registration information at the front desk at the door. Now I want to remind you to shut off your cell phones, please. Now on to the debate. Prior to the start of the debate, the candidates drew lots to see who would go first, and they are seated in that order. Kate is going to go first to make her opening statement. After that, they will rotate who goes first in answering a question or in giving their closing remarks. Each candidate will make a 2-minute opening statement. Then each candidate will be given 2 minutes to respond to every question. Each candidate also has 2 opportunities to speak out of turn as a 1-minute rebuttal to a response from another candidate. They'll indicate their desire to rebut by holding up a red card. And then at the end, each candidate will make a 1-minute closing statement. This debate will go about an hour and a half. So in the interest of time, we ask that you hold all of your applause or any verbal reactions to the remarks of the candidates so that everyone can hear the responses and so that we can get through as many questions as possible. So let's begin with the opening statements. Kate?
Okay, thank you. I guess, can you hear me okay if I stand up? Okay. My name's Kate Browning, and I'm running for Congress. And a little bit about me, if you've noticed the accent already, I'm from Belfast, from the north of Ireland. Met my husband in Germany. He was in the army. And we subsequently wound up moving to Shirley, New York, where we have raised our 3 children. My husband's an Army veteran. He is currently now a New York City detective. And I have 2 sons in the Air Force. They're stationed here at West Hampton. So I was a legislator for 12 years. I was term limited in December. I'm very proud of the record that I have. I've worked on many issues for the district, many environmental issues, quality of life issues, public safety issues. So why I'm running for Congress is we have a congressman who is not, we don't have a voice in Washington. We don't have that voice in Washington. Lee Zeldin spends more time on MSNBC and Fox News than representing the people who voted for him. So what we need to, oh, 1 minute. Okay, so one of the most important things to me is our infrastructure. We heard about the first year that we were going to have an infrastructure bill. We haven't seen that. We need to work on renewable energy, and that's something that I want to work on. I created a renewable energy task force in the Suffolk County Legislature, and I'm very proud of that, and that's something that we need to do to make sure that we have these types of projects in the right locations. So we need to protect a woman's right to choose. We need to protect people in labor. Labor is under attack right now by this administration. And we also need to make sure that we keep marriage equality. Right now, we have a Supreme Court who could overturn marriage equality tomorrow. And we need to make sure that we protect that also. So there's a lot of things that I would like to do when I get to Congress, and I'm hoping that I can get your support in June and in November.
Thank you. Elaine?
Hello, everyone. My name is Elaine DeMasi. I'm also very happy to see you here tonight. I agree with you that the stakes are very high for this election that's coming up in November. I am a scientist. I came to Long Island 22 years ago for my first job at Brookhaven National Laboratory, and I've been working there for 21 years, building infrastructure for the research community and shepherding your tax dollars and making sure that innovations are made so that we can have clean energy and clean water. I'm a candidate who has a plan for how to create new clean energy jobs for this district, and we can have a way to bottle the sun and wind that's coming into the district and create wealth that will allow us to work on other important problems like health care, like wealth inequality, like gun violence and opioid addiction, all problems that are unsolved because we need Congress to be doing a better job of working together and solve problems. We need Congress to look at the facts, just the way my colleagues do. We need Congress to collaborate and work together on things. I got a taste of how scientists interact with politics 2 years ago during the election of 2016 when climate scientists organized themselves and logged on to download federal climate data onto private servers to protect it. They did this job even before the outcome of the 2016 election was known. So I'm proud to be doing more than marching myself. The biggest unsolved problem facing our district right now is that Lee Zeldin is our representative, and I'm looking forward to, with your help, to defeat him. So I'm asking for your support.
Thank you. Perry?
Hi, everyone. My name's Perry Gershon. I, too, am running for Congress. And I'm doing it because our country is under attack right now. Donald Trump and his election has really changed the landscape, and he's put not just the causes we believe in nationally and internationally in jeopardy, but our whole republic and the core that holds us together. And that is what brought out my desire to get back into politics and run for office. I voted for the first time in 1980. I worked on Ted Kennedy's campaign, and I worked on Gary Hart's campaign 4 years later. But then I went and raised my family and spent my time the last 25 years in commercial real estate lending. But when I heard Donald Trump was running, I knew Trump from the business world. In fact, when I started, I was given a list of 10 names of people no one in the country would lend money to, and Donald Trump was #1 on the list. So the thought of him running our country was motivation for me to follow the election. And when he won, I said I have to find a way to fight back. And that led me to say I can run against Lee Zeldin. I would be a great congressman for this district, and I can really make an impact. And the Democrats must win this election to put a check on the president. Whoever wins among us in the primary, I'm going to do everything in my power to elect a Democrat. So what's this election about? Some major issues: health care, protecting the environment, getting guns off the streets, gun safety laws, and jobs. We need an economic agenda. And I can speak to all of those issues and bring the coalition together to get elected as a Democrat in the fall. So I hope you're going to listen to me tonight, and we'll have a great chance to answer questions, and I thank you.
Thank you. Vivian?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Vivian Valoria Fisher, and I, too, am running for the seat in the 1st Congressional District. I was born in the Dominican Republic, and my father had a family business. His family had a business, and there was a dictator in the Dominican Republic by the name of Trujillo who was stealing from families' businesses all across the country and making himself one of the richest people in the world. We moved to the United States when I was 3 months old. That is, my mother came with my 2 sisters who were 2 and 4 years old. My father had come right after I was born. He left the Dominican Republic to come and get an apartment for us here in New York. He was a musician and he was very successful. But unfortunately, he died when I was 6 years old. And my mother was left to raise 6 children by herself. And we were the true immigrant family who were always very appreciative of the opportunities that we had in this country, and that we have the safety net to protect us against having a tyrant ruling over us. So imagine how I felt when I began to get a glimpse of what Donald Trump was and is. And I decided to go visit Lee Zeldin when he was about to vote on the ACA repeal. When he responded to my questions with just talking points, no depth, no empathy, I knew that I had to run because our country was in an existential crisis. Our norms were being trodden upon. We were pulling out research. We were denying they were withdrawing research, denying climate change, not working at all for the working person, and lying. Just lying to the American people about everything that they were going to be doing, which have been proven to have been falsehood, to have been chaos, and a lack of leadership and a lack of respect for our norms and our Constitution.
Thank you. David?
Good evening. I'm David Pachevsky. Running for Congress is kind of like being a superhero in the sense that you're supposed to have an origin story. And I'm not a superhero, but I'll share in the brief 2 minutes I have a little bit of my origin story. My family moved from New York City to Patchogue in 1972. We thought we had arrived at the promised land. We lived in a beautiful old Victorian house. In 75, my dad lost his job. It was this fiscal crisis in the city. And then in 82, he passed away when I was 14. So we really struggled. You know, we fell out of the middle class. We couldn't afford the house. We had to move to the other side of town. My mom worked 2 jobs. She worked incredibly hard. And I was really kind of on my own because my sister was already in college. She worked day and night, literally. And what really carried me through was the support of teachers and family friends. That's what carried me through. That's what helped me get to the next step, to get a college degree, to get a master's degree, and then to have the career in public service that I've had. I've worked in New York City government on housing policy. I've worked on a host of federal programs. I haven't been an elected official, but I know how to get stuff done in government. And I've also worked internationally. I've worked in many countries in Africa as an advisor trying to build democratic institutions. So I'm running for Congress to do something, not to be someone. I want to deliver for the community and the district that delivered for me. And I know that a freshman member of Congress can't change the world. We should try, but I will work incredibly hard to take practical steps to deliver for the district, at the same time to be part of a broad coalition that works for a better country. Thank you. I look forward to tonight's discussion.
Thank you. Now we're going to go on to the questions. Judy's going to ask the first question, and Elaine will be answering it. Candidates, remember you have 2 minutes to respond to each question. Okay, Judy?
Okay. We hope that this question came from one of the students who are helping us. What compelled you to run for Congress?
The question is, what compelled me to run for Congress? So I'm going to take you back through time, about 10 years. looking at how Congress solved problems, if you listen to people who were in office at the time, they said they could be on the floor, they could be disagreeing over a point, and then they could loan each other $1 to get on the metro to go home in the evening. That's how things were until about 10 years ago, when the atmosphere changed greatly. And since I was at Brookhaven National Laboratory, I had a front row seat to see what happens. If Congress can't pass a budget, laboratory leadership, just like any agency or any other public service in the federal government, instead of doing their work, they are figuring out whose jobs to terminate. That's exactly upside down. Congress should be making sure that we have jobs in this community. After the election in 2016, I knew for a fact that it was still an insurgency time, but instead of having a fresh face that stood for everything against what we need government to be about, we need new candidates who understand large projects, who understand federal budgets, who understand traveling worldwide to make sure that contracts delivered to the United States government are built here and are built well and are built for the benefit of the American people. And I spent a year learning how to be a candidate and making sure that this community would welcome me as a candidate. And I've been pleased to say that that's exactly what happened.
Thank you. Perry?
So I talked a little bit about this in my opening. I didn't anticipate this was going to be the question now. But Donald Trump was really what pushed me to do this. But in taking a step back, Donald Trump is a product of Americans being dissatisfied with their elected officials more than anything else. That applies to the presidency, and it applies to the Congress even more so. I mean, when most polls are done, are you satisfied with your congressional representation, the numbers come back in the 20% to 30% range. And to me, I looked at what was happening and said, we need to do better. Not just we can do better, but we must. And I'm a person who's gone through life. I've adjusted to different careers. I was a medical student at one time. I owned a sports bar for multiple years. And then I went on to 25 years in commercial real estate lending. And what I did as a lender was bring parties together as a conciliator and figure out complex solutions to people's problems, as well as keep people employed by keeping things going. I was the lender who foreclosed once in 25 years. So I found ways to make things work. And that's what we need in government. And when I've gone to people to raise money for this campaign, I've been able to draw on Democrats and Republicans who know me because people believe in my integrity. And that's what we need to bring to Washington. And that's the motivation to get me running here. And I hope if I get elected to find a way to bring bipartisanship back to government. I'm going to stand for the democratic progressive causes, but I'm going to find a way to work with the other party. Because if we don't do that, this country is doomed. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian?
I too began to speak a little bit about what made me decide to run. And I can tell you that that visit to Lee Zeldin was certainly a moment for me where I decided that it was something I had to do. Why? Well, we started with the Affordable Care Act. That was the reason why I went to visit him. And I knew that a government that was now ready to leave 30 million people without health care was a government that was going in the wrong direction. I believe that health is not a commodity, that every single person has a right to health care. And as I spoke with Lee Zeldin, and I mentioned earlier that he did answer in talking points, I saw the lack of empathy, the lack of understanding the human beings that were being affected. And he had just supported a policy statement, which is called a budget, that was rolled out by the president, which was cutting out research work, the NIH, the National Institute of Health. Health, again, was being attacked by this administration. And there was no empathy. In fact, there was so little empathy that they were cutting the Meals on Wheels grants. I was in the legislature for 13 years. And the first year that I was in the legislature, I knew that I had to work on environmental issues because George Bush was just pulling us out of Kyoto. We have a president who has now pulled us out of the Paris talks. And so I will continue to do the work that I started to do as a legislator, but now I'll do it on the national level. As a legislator, I put a cap on CO2. I banned a carcinogen from our drinking water. Those were my pieces of legislation that were crafted by me with the help of local scientists. The lack of empathy. I put together a Welfare to Work Commission to help people move from welfare to work because I understood that most of the poor people were women and their children.
Thank you. David?
I'm not someone that woke up after Trump was elected and said, oh my God, I have to run for Congress. This has been my life's work, is to see that government is effective and truly working in the public interest. And I've always been for social justice and for the underdog. Since I was a kid, I mean, I saw what happened to my family. I saw what I thought was the unfairness of it. And that's been my mission in one way or another, to try to have a government that's truly working in the public interest. The fact that the government has been captured by corporate interests and warmongers, this didn't start with Trump. Trump may be the straw that breaks the camel's back, but this has been going on for a long time. In 1979, the CEOs of the largest companies made 30 times more than the average worker. Now they make 325 times more. So this trend of the smaller and smaller part of the population capturing more and more of the wealth, this has been going on for a long time. We need to fight back against that. This is part of that project. And our recklessness and immoral and bad foreign policy has also been going on for a long time. And again, it didn't start with Trump. And I want to speak directly to the young person that asked the question. Our country has been at war. We're fighting 7 wars, and there's wars in 7 different countries. We've been at war almost, if you're a person under 20, almost your entire life. And we have a responsibility, our generation, those of us here, to try to stop that, to try to turn that back, and to have a government that invests in people, that's its priority. So for me, running for Congress is part of that project. It's part of the project that I've been engaged in for a long time. And I think there's particular urgency at this moment, and there's particular urgency to beat Lee Zeldin, because he represents a lot of what is the worst in our politics.
Thank you. Kate?
What drove me to decide to... now I got it. Okay, good. What drove me to decide to run against run for Congress? Lee Zeldin. He's absent. He's absent from the district, and I've seen it when I was a Suffolk County legislator. You know, Lee Zeldin lives like 2 miles from me. And I worked on a sewer project for 10 years, and Lee Zeldin has done absolutely nothing to help with that. I secured $189 million for that project. Lee Zeldin was absent. You know, the NRA, he takes notes from the NRA. We have a concealed carry reciprocity bill that law enforcement said, don't do that, and he did it. So that's all he cares about. I can tell you, when I was working on the campaigns last year, knocking on doors, I did have constituents who said to me, what are you doing next? You can't stop now. And said to me, why don't you run against Lee Zeldin? We would vote for you. I've talked to many veterans, and while he says vote for the vet, and he claims to be the veteran, a lot of veterans are very disappointed with him that he is not truly representing their values. The Northport VA, just take a look at that. That's another reason. You know, labor. His labor votes, he is so anti-labor, and many of the labor votes that he's taken, he's gutting OSHA, he's gutting the NLRB, and basically what's going to happen is health and safety of workers every day is in jeopardy. And I believe there's something like a 13% increase in injuries and deaths in the past year. Bottom line is, we need good government. He's so far to the right that he's forgotten who he's supposed to be representing. You have to be able to work across party lines. You have to be able to work with the other side to get things done. And he's forgotten to do that. And that's why I want to run, is because I have a record of being able to work across party lines, being able to get things done. And I think that's important. And let's talk about our Social Security and Medicare. So now they have this budget, and they want to gut that too.
Thank you. Okay, the next question, Brendan is going to ask the next question. And Perry, you'll be first.
If you win the Democratic nomination, will your campaign for Congress focus more on motivating the left to come out and vote for you, or will you focus on appealing to moderate independent and moderate Republican voters?
So, assuming I'm the candidate, I'm going to focus on both. In order to win in this district, you need a coalition. So you need to be able to get good turnout from the left. You need to turn out the strong Democratic areas in the South Fork and in northern Brookhaven especially. And if we don't get that turnout, which we did not get the last 2 elections, there's no way we're going to win. We need to energize our base in order to do that on core Democratic values. But we also need to bring some other people into this group, people who are independent or Republican and are just not happy with President Trump. And I'm sure there are a lot of them. In fact, I talked to many of those people. There are areas that the Democrats can carry with the right messaging, such as Smithtown, which Smithtown is highly educated. The number of people in Smithtown, while they tend to vote Republican, have a strong education level, and that grouping tends to correlate with people who don't care for Donald Trump and what he stands for. So I think that's a real opportunity for us to take votes. And Democrats do win in Smithtown. Steve Ballone does consistently. So, and Tim Sinney just did. So that's the path. My background has been in business, and my messaging is going to talk about employment and how to grow jobs back in Suffolk County. And the ability to do that is a message that we didn't do that with working class people in the last election. That's how Trump got there. If we have credible messaging to workers that we're going to bring better paying jobs, particularly in clean energy, to Suffolk County, people are going to want to vote Democratic, and that's how we build the coalition. The other big issue, and I'm going to get cut off on time, is taxes. We got to run against the Republican tax cut.
Thank you. Vivian?
I won 7 elections to the legislature. My district was a little bit less than third Democrat, a little bit more than a third was Republican, and the rest were either the third party or independent voters. And I won 7 times. And how did I do that? I couldn't have done it with just the Democratic votes. I did it because people saw that I was able to produce and represent my community. When I say produce, I had legislation that was groundbreaking. The environment is important to everyone in Suffolk County. And I had groundbreaking legislation which required the county to build only buildings that were built according to green standards. I authored that and pursued it. I had to work for 2 years to make that happen. I support women. I hired a woman to work for me, and she then ran for the legislature. She is now the majority leader of the legislature. I saw a young woman who I thought was would be very good as a leader, and she's now the only Democrat of the Brookhaven Town Council. As I said, I'm on the board of Planned Parenthood. I supported women who were victims of domestic violence, and women across the board supported me whenever I have won. I have stood for the immigrants in Suffolk County. That doesn't necessarily have to alienate the people who are far to the right. Well, if they're that far to the right, that you may not. But we're seeing farmers who need immigrant workers. And I have a very close relationship with farmers because I created a program called the Agricultural Stewardship Program, which helped farmers to lower their insecticide, pesticide, and water use. And they wound up saving money and saving the environment. These are problem-solving tactics, which are not just tactics, but there's something that really help everyone in the community.
Thank you. David?
To win, we're going to have to excite and engage people that are not typical midterm voters. So that means youth, that means the different demographic groups throughout the district. And if we don't do that, we won't win. My campaign is about, in part about that, about speaking out to young people, about speaking out to newly registered voters from the Muslim community. And we need those people to win. They should be part of the broader Democratic coalition. So there are some people that are looking for a message of hope, for a broad vision, and then there are other people that are looking for more concrete things, such as we'd like to see the Long Island Railroad be a decent functioning commuter rail. And I can also speak to that, because I'm someone, I'm not proud to say it, but I work for the MTA. So I actually know a thing or two about what's wrong with it. So I can speak, I've worked with dozens of federal grant programs. I can speak in very practical terms to those voters that that's what they're looking for as well. And that crosses party lines. But the common denominator, left or right, however you want to define it, is the economy, and that people are like, Long Island is unaffordable. Long Island is unaffordable. We are being, taxed. Our health care is unaffordable. And so addressing that, I don't see that the path, the question is, what's the way we're going to address that? I don't see that as a left or right issue. It's saying, recognizing just how hard-pressed people are, and what are the concrete steps that we're going to do to make things better for people? What are the investments that the federal government can and should be doing, and how are we going to get things done? And that'll appeal to a large swath of voters. That's what I'm finding as I'm going to the doors.
Thank you. Kate?
Okay, I represented the 3rd Legislative District, which was more Republicans than Democrats, yet I've never lost an election. I've always won with no less than 57% of the vote. And why is that? Because I've appealed to all of them. I've represented them well. And when you represent your district, whether they voted for you or not, they're not your constituents, and you have to do right by them all the time. So I think what's important is making sure that we focus on the bread and butter issues, is what I call them. It's if you can't afford to pay for the roof over your head and pay for the food on your table, then they don't want to vote for you. And if you're not going to give them that message and tell them that's what you're going to work on, they don't want to vote for you. And that's the things that I believe that we need to talk about, is those bread and butter issues. And let's talk about salt. How many people are going to be impacted by that salt deduction and not being able to have that anymore? Let's talk about health care. Lee Zeldin voted for the Trump care. He supports the Trump care. And that Trump care would have hurt millions of people across the country. And right here in CD1, it would have hurt over 30,000 people. So those are the issues that I think are most important. 60% of Brookhaven is where the votes are. And so we need to be able to appeal to them. And I do say, I'm married to a veteran. I have 2 sons in the military. My husband's a New York City cop. I was a former school bus driver, and believe it or not, Lee Zeldin rode my bus. However, we do have to be able to touch those blue-collar voters, because they're the people that are going to win this election. They're the people that we need to win this election.
Thank you. Elaine?
My message is for everyone in the district who wants government to solve problems and make sure that we have well-paid work for everybody. I am the only candidate with a specific plan for exactly how we will leverage what we have in the clean energy economy, the research economy, and our talented workforce that knows how to manufacture, knows how to build, knows how to drive the boats, knows how to maintain and operate equipment. The reason I am so focused on this is because we have to do much more than ask the federal government for infrastructure money. We are qualified here in the district to provide to the rest of the country from our talents and our natural resources. And the pride in this district understands that we can do that. I'm going to expand our trade schools so that there are no breakdowns in the pipeline for anyone who wants any type of education to get them into trade school, into community college, into university, and into these clean energy jobs. We know on Long Island how important it is to protect our water. We know on Long Island that it will take savings of the money to pay for revisions of our sewer system. We know that we will have to pay for our infrastructure. And when we solve other problems, like our unfair healthcare system that wastes too much money in the insurance business rather than providing healthcare, we'll have that money to provide the infrastructure that we need.
Thank you. The next question will be asked by Judy, and Vivian, you will answer first.
Immigration is a big concern out here. What specifically would you do to combat fear-mongering, and do you believe in an easier path to citizenship? What's your opinion?
Thank you. I had to deal with this issue as a Suffolk County legislator, and I think that many of you already know that we had quite a number of years when immigration and fear-mongering and the kind of thing that you see going on now with the president coming here to visit and speaking about people as animals. We faced this in Suffolk County, and I fought back against Steve Levy when he introduced one of the most draconian pieces of legislation, and I was called racial slurs, my life was threatened, and a truck sat in front of my house for 6 hours with placards saying, "Deport Vivian Fisher." I'm the only person who's standing before you who has stood up against that fear-mongering regarding immigrants. I would want to go back to the comprehensive immigration program that was before the Congress under President Bush with the Gang of Eight, who put together a comprehensive plan. We have to first, though, deal with the dreamers who have been who have had the rug pulled out from under their feet. They were made a promise, and they jumped through all of the hoops that they needed to jump through. They fulfilled every requirement. They did get DACA status, and then Trump flipped it on them. It's not fair. When you have a young person say to you, "I never knew that I was undocumented until I went to get my driver's permit and I found out, my parents had to tell me." Imagine how that 16-year-old felt. We need to have a path to citizenship. We also need to have a temporary visa program that works for our farmers. There are so many migrant workers who, time is up. Anyway, we need to do something.
Thank you. David?
We should not fall into the narrative that immigration is a problem. We shouldn't accept that narrative. We know that immigration is a strength. It's what makes this country stronger. That open societies are dynamic societies. They're dynamic culturally, they're dynamic economically. So we can't fall into trying to appease people around this issue. We have to stay strong and make the affirmative case about why immigration is good. And the fact that people don't have good jobs or affordable housing or affordable health care is not due to immigrants. That's a narrative that's being peddled by unscrupulous and politicians such as Trump, and we shouldn't accept it. We should say that's a scam, that's inaccurate. Immigrants, the numbers are clear. Immigrants make our country stronger. So that's where I would begin in addressing that issue. And then we can talk in practical terms about what are policy solutions. But really, you know, investment in workforce housing, for example, that would be something that would be good for everyone. It would be good for small business owners that are trying to retain their workforce, and everyone across the island, whether you're an immigrant or not. There's a huge number of people that housing is simply unaffordable. So this is something that we can find policy solutions where we can band together. My wife's family are immigrants from Uganda that came here from East Africa. So of course this is a topic that we talk a lot about, and it's something I feel strongly about. You know, the thing, of course, also is to try to find common ground. I look forward to standing in front of a room full of Republicans and pointing out that my mother-in-law, who's an elderly Ugandan Indian woman, is the biggest, you know, damn Yankees fan you can imagine, and just as much as any working class white or Latino person.
Thank you, Dave. Kate?
Okay, I'm an immigrant myself, and the opportunities that this country has afforded me, I'm standing up here living the dream. and have the opportunity to run for Congress. And that should be afforded to any immigrant who does come here. Lee Zeldin went to the William Floyd School District. The salutatorian and the valedictorian of the William Floyd School District are both children of immigrants. And he needs to see that, and he needs to realize the benefits of the immigrants in our country. So let's talk about the farmers. We do need that worker visa program for our farmers. Our farmers are going to have a problem. They're not going to be able to produce what we buy right here and buy local here in Long Island. So, you know, there are many law-abiding immigrants here. And the majority of Americans support immigrants being able to stay. They support the dreamers. So we have many of them who are law-abiding, play by the rules, obeying the law, and they're paying taxes. So we need to work and help them to continue to stay here and to work towards citizenship. And I don't need my 2 minutes. I think I've said what I need to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Elaine?
I'm a scientist, and so I've spent the better part of my working life around people from everywhere in the world. They're my partners, they're my collaborators, they're my co-authors. And when the question was asked, how are we going to combat Lee Zeldin's fear-mongering rhetoric? And we have to hold him accountable with the facts. The fact is that, and it's not just the statistics of the facts, but we need to hold him accountable to the fact that our agricultural workers and employers need a skills-based system so that migrant workers might not be bound to a particular employer, but to a trade that they carry out. We need to hold Zeldin accountable to the facts that he's not listening to his own workers. We need to show him that his own constituents overwhelmingly favor keeping our promises with the DACA program and with the temporary protected status program. We need to ensure that our government tells the truth about criminal activity vis-a-vis immigrants or anybody else. I'm proud of the United States immigration system. It holds up 4 values that are very important to all of us. It keeps families together. It ensures that we do have special skills coming into the country. It ensures that a diversity of immigrants from all over the world will come here, and it makes way for us to be compassionate when there are catastrophes and refugee situations. So we need to be knowledgeable about some of the things that make our immigration system difficult to carry out properly. There are bans to reentry if people overstay a visa. That actually works against what we want to have done. And we need to know, and we need our constituents to know, that about half of the undocumented immigrants have overstayed a visa as opposed to the amount who have entered the borders in another way. We have to know the facts, and then we can solve the problems.
Thank you. Perry?
So immigrants are part of the core of America, and we need to keep immigration flowing in America. We need to take care of the dreamers and give them a path to citizenship. We need to take care of the TPS recipients, and we really need comprehensive immigration reform. And everybody in this country knows it. So why don't we have it yet? What's going on? There was an interesting article in Politico yesterday that talked about why Zeldin does so well in this district. And it's about using the immigrants as his foil. And he and Trump are calling immigrants animals. They were here yesterday. And the more they can encourage people's xenophobia and rage, the more they make it an issue to divide us. So we, as Democrats in this campaign, can't fall into their trap. We need to present immigration properly, offer some kind of solution, let people know where immigrants can be helpful in our life, and have a plan for dealing with MS-13, because that's going to be the biggest talking point. Well, MS-13, the best thing we can do about MS-13 is get immigrants out of the shadows. When immigrants are hiding from law enforcement, they are fair game, fodder for MS-13, and we need to change that cycle so that immigrants work with law enforcement, are part of our society, and don't want anything to do with MS-13. That's how we're going to beat them. And by offering a solution, we have a way that's not just give everyone citizenship. We have a way of taking the dialogue back from Zeldin and Trump. That's what we're going to have to do in this campaign. We have to walk a fine line, be careful, but speak to what's important. And the Dreamers especially are a class that everybody in this country feels good about. So they should be the focus of the campaign, along with doing something about MS-13. Thank you.
Thank you. And there's a red card. Vivian?
Yes, and I wasn't certain, is it, if it's only if you need to rebuff or to add something?
You can add something or
Okay.
rebut, and you get a minute.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to add two very quick things to bounce off what Elaine said regarding the facts. When I was in the legislature, my very first year, there was a legislator who came into the legislative horseshoe and had a binder full of what he called were crimes that were being committed by immigrants. While everyone else rather accepted his position, but I asked him for that binder, and I took it to headquarters and went through it. There was one crime. There was one page that had one crime, and it was a man who stole a pair of boots from Kmart. Everything else were complaints that people were loitering, that kind of thing. So that's where the facts really have to be used. And I want to go also to what Perry was just saying regarding how to handle MS-13. It can't just be handled with cops and threats. We need to have something for kids to do after school. And when I was in the legislature and I proposed after-school activities, oh, that was called soft money. Better to put the money in more policing. So that's how we address that.
Thank you. Brendan is going to ask the next question, and David, you'll be first.
If the Democrats take back the majority of the House of Representatives, would you be in favor of seeing Nancy Pelosi return as the Speaker of the House, or would you prefer new leadership?
I have a lot of respect for Nancy Pelosi. I think it's a time for new leadership. But it has to be the right leadership. We need a leader. So I wouldn't say absolutely never. I mean, you have to look at what your choices are. But I want to see a leadership in the Democratic Party that moves the party in a direction that places a greater emphasis on the needs of working people, of average Americans, and also moves us away from our disastrous foreign policy. The party is not where it needs to be on foreign policy. Too many of the leadership of the party voted for the Iraq War. The party remains silent and many don't strongly oppose ongoing wars, and these have a tremendous moral and financial cost, and that just must change. So I really want to see, I do think it's time for new leadership, but it has to be the right leadership, and I want to see leadership that moves the party in a direction towards economic fairness and towards a shift away from a foreign policy that's dominated by the interest of defense contractors.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, first of all, she is the first woman to have been the leader, and I certainly respect that, and I respect many things that she's done. However, I just finished my term at the legislature with a term limit, and I do believe in leadership there has to be term limits, and that's something that I think should be considered. And who wants to lead? So I think that's the other issue, is who is going to put their hat in the ring to be the leader? And I think that is something that I would want to have an opportunity to take consideration. And let's talk about Paul Ryan. Paul Ryan is partisan, and all he cares about his partisan politics. And so we need to make sure that whoever that leader is, when I came into the Suffolk County Legislature, we had our presiding officer, Bill Lindsay, and he was a uniter, not a divider. And he worked across party lines, and we had a strong legislature under his leadership. And I think that's what we need. Whoever we have as the leader in the House needs to be somebody who can unite and not divide, unlike what Paul Ryan's done.
Thank you. Elaine?
I look forward to influencing the leader in our delegation in Congress, whether it's influencing Nancy Pelosi or whether it's voting new leadership into place. I also know what it is to be a professional woman. I have a PhD in physics, and I know how many times it sometimes took to get a point through the other people in the room, from that position. And so when I look at strong female leaders, I look at them through that lens. That being said, if there needs to be a decision made and hard choices made, my vote is with the younger generation and the younger voters. The younger generation understands that far too many regressive laws, tax laws, insurance laws, education lending laws, banking laws, far too many regressive laws have been passed, and it's time to reverse those drastically. Young people know that we've been at war and that we need not to be spending down the skills and people that we have on war. So I would say that the next leader in our delegation in Congress will be a very impressive individual that I will be proud to vote for, and then when I find myself disagreeing with them, which is certainly going to be the case, I look forward to influencing them towards the most progressive agenda that the future can stand.
Thank you. David would like to play a red card.
Yeah, I had raised it. My question is, I'm sorry, I'd raised it, but my question is for Kate. So obviously, you know, the question about leadership is somewhat speculative because we don't know who's running. But Kate, I understand, you know, you've received significant funding through Joe Crowley's PAC, Congressman Joe Crowley, Congressman in Queens, and there's no secret that he's considered, is interested in being Speaker and taking over leadership of the party. So, you know, my concern about Congressman Crowley is that he voted for the war in Iraq. And this was a disastrous mistake. If I voted for that, I would hope that I would leave public life and spend the rest of my life like digging latrines and somewhere else. No, seriously. So, so, of course, you know, if I'm elected, I'm going to have to work with my colleague, Congressman Crowley, but I would like to hear your thoughts on him as a candidate for Speaker, since he's been so supportive of your campaign.
Kate, would you like to use one of your red cards to respond?
Oh, I have to use the card to respond? Okay, I'll use my card.
Yeah.
Yes, I have received the support. Congressman Crowley believes in my campaign, and he believes that I'm the only one can win, and that's why he's supporting me. I've also received support from Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney, Congressman Steny Hoyer. I've also received support from Senator Kirsten Gillibrand off the sidelines, PAC. And so, you know, I believe Steny Hoyer might be somebody who's another person who may be interested in being the leader. So it doesn't matter whether they give me money or not. I'm a very independent person, and I believe that in my time at the legislature, I've shown that I don't follow the party line. I do what I have to do for my district and what's right for the district and what's right for the country, and that's what I will do. So it doesn't matter about whether Joe Crowley give me money. I'm very proud of the fact that there are so many members of the House and also Kirsten Gillibrand's off the sidelines that have, you know, supported me, given me money for my campaign.
Thank you. Now we're going back to the main question. Perry, do you need it repeated?
Thank you. So I've had the good fortune of meeting Nancy Pelosi a few times during this campaign. And she is doing a tremendous job of rallying support for Democratic candidates throughout the country. In 2010, Nancy Pelosi became a foil for the Republican Party. And if there was a time for her to step down as House leader, it was probably after the 2010 election when the Democrats lost the majority. But if we take the majority back in 2018, which I hope and pray we're going to do, I think Nancy Pelosi deserves another chance at being House Majority Leader, and House Speaker. You look at what she's accomplished in her career, and she stands for the progressive movement and progressive causes. There are races, like Connor Lamb's, where the district does not jibe well with progressivism. So Connor Lamb came out against Nancy Pelosi. But that was to get a specific part of the country, a very Republican district. This is a purple district. So I'm supporting Pelosi if she wants the job. I'll add to this, I'm not 100% sure she's going to run for Speaker again. I think she's going to pull the party together. She is going to deliver the majority for the Democrats. But then where do we go after that? If she wants it, I'm going to vote for her. If she doesn't want it, then I hope some younger leadership steps up. Not Steny Hoyer and not Joe Crowley, because they too are older. And I do think we need to go at some point to the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian?
I was very impressed when the Congress was deliberating on going into the Iraq War and Nancy Pelosi voted not to go in. And I was very disappointed that Hillary voted yes, because they were two women that I had admired for their leadership. As to my position now, is something which I think would be premature. When you're in a deliberative body, you need to see the dynamic of that body, you need to see the relationships from the inside and make a decision once you're in and once you understand how the dynamics work. As to the donations by legislative leaders to somebody in a primary, let me be very clear that what they generally do is they follow the lead of the county chair. And the county chair has put his thumb on this particular race, although not very overtly, he has. And when we go to how that has happened, when I was in the legislature, I had to stand up quite a number of times against the party. I was in opposition to the Democratic Party cross-endorsing all 4 of the county-wide elected officials. And I stood up against my party leader on that because I felt that the franchise was being stolen from the voters. We had a treasurer, a comptroller, a sheriff, and a DA, and a county clerk who were all endorsed by the Republican and Democratic parties. So voters did not have a vote. I also went head to head against my chairman when he wanted to divide and gerrymander a district in half. And it was a minority district, and it went to federal court, and that district won.
Thank you. Judy is going to ask the next question, and Kate, you'll be first.
The question is, what would you do to either amend, improve, or replace Obamacare?
There's no.
The Affordable Care Act does still exist.
You know, I think what's happened is President Obama, when he first presented the Affordable Care Act, he admitted himself that it wasn't perfect and it may need change. And when we look at what Mitt Romney did, it needed many changes. And so I think the Affordable Care Act right now, I would support amending it, improving it. And I think that, you know, I know there's a lot of talk about Medicare for all, single payer, public option. Are those a possibility? Yes, maybe they are a possibility. But at this point in time, basically what the Republicans have done is they've sabotaged the Affordable Care Act. And that's why it's failing. So when I go to Congress, I certainly want to look at every opportunity, because the reality is health care is a right and not a privilege. And we need to make sure that whatever kind of health care plan we have for the citizens, that it is something that's affordable and that it's quality care for everybody, not just a select few. So I would work towards improving the Affordable Care Act. And again, moving forward, if the tone is to go towards a Medicare for all or a single payer public option, certainly it needs to be addressed. But at this point in time, you know, creating a health care plan for the country is not something that's going to happen overnight. That's going to take quite some time to make it happen. And again, we have a president, if you were to put Medicare for all right under his nose tomorrow, I don't think he's going to sign it. So we need to be, unlike the Republicans who said repeal and replace, and they said for how many years they had a plan. Well, they didn't have a plan. So they repealed, but they had no replacement. So that's something that we need to make sure that when we get there, and when the Democrats do take control of the House, that they do have a real plan to repeal and replace, or to, again, to move towards a better health care system for the country.
Thank you. Elaine?
My answer is to replace, and now I'll tell you why I feel so strongly about that. First of all, I am listening to what this Purple District is saying about, you know, some of the larger healthcare institutions are talking about simply trying to fix the ACA, and I think we can give them what they want in terms of stability, not by refusing to replace the ACA, but just by making sure that the replacing is phased in, is a plan that is funded properly and intelligently over some years. Now, the ACA was possible to sabotage. That's an unacceptable vulnerability. How is it sabotaged? Specifically in the money that was designed to buttress the insurance marketplace. That means that that manner of having a buttressed insurance marketplace is not strong enough. That's a reason for me not to revise the ACA, but to replace it. For those who've said that these systems need more study, I'm going to offer that the ACA and its alternative, the Medicare for All, were studied for 15 years. H.R. 676 is a bill that was first introduced in 2003. It predates the ACA by some years. And now it's called Medicare for All. It's very specific. It has a long list of required treatments, required coverages that Americans need. And there are examples all around the world that a system like that saves a considerable amount of money, which we need because we cannot afford to waste it. We have to use the funds that we will save to build our other infrastructure. So I'm confident that we can replace the ACA with Medicare for All systematically with a strongly funded plan that funds the states to phase in and change their programs, as we're going to need to do over years, over several years.
Thank you. Perry?
Kate said it quite well. Medicare is a right. It's not a privilege. Medical care is a right and not a privilege. Health care. And we need to make sure we can deliver universal health care to everybody in this country. I support Medicare for All. It's the best way to have a single-payer system. It's better than what we have now because it gets coverage to everyone by definition. It's a better system than we have now because it takes the burden for paying for health care out of the individual, and people won't be struggling to pay their health care costs like they do today. And it's better than what we have now because it takes the burden for paying for health care away from the employers. And that's going to allow small business to thrive because they're not going to have to worry about health care plans. And it's also better for the employee because they can switch jobs and not worry about losing health care while they're doing that. They're not a slave to their current employer the way they are in today's system. It's cheaper because the administrative costs are lower in a single-payer system, and it's better. However, having said all that, we're not going to get there overnight. President Trump is an obstacle, and we're going to need more numbers than we'll get in this election to get there. So in the meantime, we have to shore up the ACA. It is under attack by Trump. By getting rid of the individual mandate, he's doing everything he can to drive up health insurance costs. That's a real problem, and we're going to see it next year. We don't have enough insurers competing to provide coverage, so we need to do something to get more people into the market, and that may be the public option. But most of all, while Trump is in office and until we have Medicare for All, we have to find a bipartisan solution to get there, because that's the only way we'll get it through the government. Patty Murray and Lamar Alexander had an idea, and the Senate would not let it come to the floor. We have to let that go through to solve our problems for now. Thank you.
Thank you. Vivian?
In 2008, I was at the Democratic Convention as a delegate for Barack Obama. And I was with a group of people on the platform committee who were talking about single payer being part of the Democratic platform. That was 2008, because we had already seen that there was a medical program that Romney had worked out in Massachusetts that looked good, but we wanted to go a step further. And the Blue Dog Democrats would absolutely not allow it to happen. So Barack Obama came into office, and he had to start out with a compromise because he had to bring the Blue Dog Democrats along with him. And what happened was that he had to treat health care as a product and talk about its value and the providers and how you were going to make them whole. And as Elaine said, that led us to a kind of we blocked ourselves in, we boxed ourselves in with that because we needed that mandate in order to maintain the system working. It didn't work. It doesn't work to use healthcare as a product. It's not a commodity. It's a right. We have to move to Medicare for all. Single payer was a good idea when I first saw it at that convention. It's still a good idea. It's the best idea. And HR 676 is very well detailed. It's a great start.
Thank you. David?
We don't have a healthcare system right now. What we have is a healthcare industry that makes profits, and then there are some people that are trying to provide healthcare services within that framework. My wife is a pediatric ER doctor, and we talk about it every day, how healthcare is rationed by the insurance companies, and people can't get the healthcare they need. And I think we all experience that, right? Even if you have good insurance, you end up, spending countless hours fighting on the phone because if you need medication, you now need pre-approval, or you can't use this pharmacist because it's out of network. It's a money-making scheme. And so the research and evidence is clear that single payer will reduce costs overall. It's an effective way of providing better health care for more people. I am not unrealistic about the fact that public policy involves trade-offs. My work in New York City government involved doing the fiscal impact analysis on legislation. It involved leading teams that would do the fiscal impact analysis on very complicated legislation. New York City has a huge budget, $80 billion, bigger than most states, bigger than many countries. So I'm very much aware that when you push through policy changes, there are going to be trade-offs. The analysis, though, I think on this one is clear, and there is a path to get there. So I'm a strong supporter of Medicare for all. We can't wait around. We have to try to build a coalition to get there, because that's where we need to be. I'll be part of that coalition.
Thank you. We only have time for 2 more questions, so questioners, make them really good. Brendan is going to ask the next one, and Elaine, you get to be first.
If you lose the primary election in June, how will you redirect your effort and energy?
If I lose the primary election in June, I will help the winner of the primary in any way that I am asked to help. I live here in the district. My opponent is unsolved problems. I am standing up here because Congress has become a body that cannot solve our problems. Lee Zeldin is a problem that I will help solve, whether I'm asked to be your nominee or whether I am asked to help in any other way. This is where I live.
Thank you. Barry?
We get variants of this question all the time, and usually it's more of a question, will you support the winner? And the answer there is, of course I will. I'm running because we need to elect Democrats, and we need to put a check on the president. So whichever one of us wins, at the end of the day, the key is to beat Lee Zeldin. In terms of what I can do, there are 2 things I can really offer. One, my campaign has been run on ideas and solutions to problems. And I hope whoever the winner is will want to use my services to help create ideas going forward. And the second one, of the candidates here, my geography is a little bit different. I'm in the South Fork. So I would offer my services to help coordinate the South Fork effort and just the other part of the district, this side of the canal. But the real key is that whoever the winning candidate is wants those services. If they don't, I certainly don't want to get in the way. But I'm all in. The goal is to beat Lee Zeldin.
Thank you. Vivian?
When I was term limited from the legislature, I turned my attention and my energies to working as an advocate. I was on the board of Planned Parenthood and also on the PAC. I was teaching ESL in a local church and working with immigrants at that church. And I volunteered for my own food policy council, which addresses food deserts. and nutritional issues in Suffolk County, and works with farmers throughout Suffolk County. Those are issues that will continue to have to be worked on. Of course, I want to beat Lee Zeldin. I want to see the right person win the race on June 26th. I hope it'll be me, and don't we all? But I will continue my efforts to work on the quality of life for the people, the immigrants, the environmental issues, the women's issues, which are being hammered every day in Washington. And sometimes as an advocate, you get more movement from your legislative representatives nationally. And so I will continue to be an advocate for the causes that I've been working for. This is my home. I've lived in the 1st Congressional District for 50 years. I taught here, I raised 5 children here, and I want to see the quality of life and the protections for my daughters and my granddaughter as they grow into women, that they will have the choices that they need, that they will be able to decide what to do with their own bodies and not have legislative bodies telling them what their choices have to be. So I will continue to be an advocate.
Thank you. David?
I'm on leave from an organization called Generation Citizen, which does, its mission, it's a nationwide nonprofit that does youth civic engagement. And that's something I want to continue doing. I think that's crucial that in this district and nationwide, we continue to build the politics of the future. And that means engaging young people and getting them involved. My campaign has done a lot of that already. It's a very young, dynamic team. Of course, we need the support of everyone, but I think that's very important. I think that's important for us to win this seat, and I think it's important for the future of politics in this district. And we have to find a way where people from different backgrounds can come together and find what they have in common to build a better country. And I think in many ways the best hope for that is among young people that have grown up in a different time and are trying to overcome some of the divisions that we've experienced and that all of us who are older have kind of been raised in. So that would be the ongoing project. I will support whoever wins this primary, but I do want to say, you know, I could give the most impassioned speech in support of my fellow candidates, and it won't necessarily bring people who voted for me out unless they also do that outreach. So the onus is going to be on whoever of us wins to reach out to everyone across the district so we can build a coalition that can not only beat Lee Zeldin this time around, but continue to grow and have better politics in this district and better politics in this country.
Thank you. Kate?
So Lee Zeldin is not right for our district, and I've lived in my community for 30 years. I represented the 3rd Legislative District for 12 years, and when Tim Bishop was our congressman, I knocked doors for him every time he was running for election to make sure that he would win. So I think that's important, and why I want to do it, and I will support whoever wins, is because I'm doing it for my family. I'm doing it for my children. I'm doing it for my grandchildren. That we need to have a representative who is going to represent the needs of our families here in Long Island. And I will continue to work. I will knock doors, and I will accept, thank you, Perry, if I win, I will accept your help. So thank you. And I will give you my help in the 3rd Legislative District, and any of the candidates. I will work in the 3rd Legislative District and certainly ask everyone who has supported me that it's important that they get out and vote for the Democratic candidate.
Thank you. Can you hold your applause, please? Okay, last question. Judy?
What are your thoughts on addressing the opioid crisis?
So the opioid crisis is a big deal, both nationally and very specifically in this district. what are the reasons for it? Well, you can blame the drug users and try to send them into jail, which is what Trump is talking about. And that is the wrong approach. We need to have better treatment options and better rehabilitation. But even before that, we need to combat the problem before it begins. That means going at the drug companies. And I left out in my healthcare answer, one of the things we need to be doing is going at the drug companies to reduce prescription drug prices. That's a critical component of our health care going forward. And when it pertains to opioids, we need to encourage people not to get on addictive opioid drugs. And the insurance companies have done the opposite in the past. They've pushed people onto addictive opioids for their own reasons because that's how they make money. We need to stop that. We need to take care of our veterans when they come home, when they return from their time away, and they come back with injuries and pain. We need to start working with them before they get addicted to opioids. If we do that, we'll nick the problem to a large extent before it really takes off. We have to look at treatment and rehabilitation, as I said, because that is the path forward and not incarceration. Thanks.
Thank you. Vivian?
It's going to be repetitive because we have to have our doctors be more, almost be retrained in the use of painkillers, because obviously they have been giving out opioids too freely for too long, and too many people have become addicted because of that. And so we have to work with our medical profession to provide other means of pain relief, some acupuncture and other such methods of pain relief. Another is, or just going back to Tylenol and aspirin, or Aleve, rather than going into opioids. The second is to have rehab facilities that can keep people long enough to really be rehabilitated. There's recent data showing that insurance companies will not cover more than 10 days in some cases, some even as low as 7 days. That's a disgrace. And then finding locations for those rehab facilities. There's an awful lot of NIMBY in Suffolk County, and people claim to want to solve the epidemic of opioid addiction, and yet don't want to have a rehabilitation facility in their neighborhoods and are protesting against them. We have to go after the pharmaceutical companies. Suffolk County has a lawsuit against pharmaceuticals because of the false claims that they presented to the medical profession regarding their products. Again, we go back to the corporate bottom line, making those profits and selling products just as bad as cigarettes. That's how bad the pharmaceutical companies have been behaving, just as bad as the tobacco companies years ago when they weren't giving us the truth.
Thank you. David?
I agree with what Perry and Vivian have said, that we need to focus on treatment and rehabilitation. There may be a role for law enforcement in some way, but it's not should not be the core of addressing opioid addiction. We need to try to treat people who are suffering from addiction, from alcoholism, from mental illness with compassion. That's, I think, the starting point for what the public policy should be. And I do think that investment in mental health services we need much more investment in mental health services as part of the puzzle. And there is an issue on the supply side as well with the pharmaceutical industry. I mean, that they are, in some ways, I mean, I feel like they're pushers. My wife actually is engaged in it, and she's the lead on a study she's doing that is trying to see if Tylenol can be a substitute for opioids for the treatment of pain in sickle cell patients. So it was just interesting that Vivian mentioned that. Yeah. So yes, I mean, it's a problem we have to tackle, but a lot of these social problems, you know, the root causes are people despair and a failing economy, an economy that doesn't work for everyone. And so we need to address the problem at hand, but we also need to step back and look at the big picture.
Thank you. Kate?
Well, I've been to too many funerals for young people who have died from drug addiction. And this is something I'm very passionate about when I represented my district. But, you know, law enforcement is a part of it. We need to get really tough on these drug dealers. But we do need the treatment, we need education, and that takes money. There's another few things. Vivian mentioned the county suing the drug companies. I was in the legislature when we passed that law, and when we passed that legislation to sue the drug companies. And we need to go after them, and they need to, just like the cigarette lawsuit, they need to come up with the money to help with this problem also. There was a study and a report done, and a couple of the issues were, one was recovery schools. Because when these kids are coming out of treatment, or adults, many of our young people coming out of treatment programs and going back to school, they start their problem all over again. So there is an initiative to try and start recovery schools so that the kids continue to get continued care. Extended treatment. While I was at the legislature, one of the biggest problems I had was these unregulated sober homes. It's anybody could open up a home, pack it in with a bunch of people who are in recovery, and basically they're not overseeing what was going on. I've been to Albany many times trying to get Albany to oversee OASIS and to get OASIS to regulate these homes. They're starting to listen. They are starting to listen, and they see that there is a need, because there's too many of these unregulated homes where people are going in there, going back on their drug problem, and I can tell you how many of them that I've had to deal with where people are dying in these homes and they're supposed to be sober. We hear about these sober homes. So that is something that we need to do, is we need to regulate these sober homes and make sure that they have the programs that they need. And while I was at the legislature, we created a program, a pilot program, and we have a couple of homes that are up and running. And these are homes with people in recovery, with programs and everything that needs to be done to help them.
Thank you. Elaine?
It's heartbreaking that after each generation, it seems like it's rediscovering this opioid problem. Treatments get better, research on how to solve the problem gets better, and the laws stay the same or in some cases get worse. I have some specific plans based in the evidence. One is that laws must not be moralistic. There's a place for medical cannabis. There's a place for needle sharing programs, and they can't be voted down anymore just because certain people find them unpalatable. Number two, our revised healthcare system has to make rehabilitation last long enough to work. Number three, as I've learned from speaking to the recovery centers here on Long Island, without transportation infrastructure, people cannot get to the programs that are there. These are people who should not be driving and cannot be driving for a wealth of different reasons, and there's not a bus to get them to the center if their insurance will cover the treatments that they need. Number four, pharmaceutical companies are prescribing opioids to children that never would have been allowed years ago, and I would work to reverse those laws. I know very well from my colleagues in science how the profit-driven pharmaceutical industry does push solutions onto doctors, knowing better.
Thank you. Kate would like to use her second red card.
Sure. Just to tap onto that, you know, Elaine talked about the lack of transportation. So while I was at the legislature, I passed a resolution basically to look at recovery homes, treatment facilities, transportation. And so there is currently a study that's going on and a plan being set up. IT is currently working on that in Suffolk County to basically map out where all of the locations are, where the treatment facilities are, where people are living, and where the transportation is so we can better serve them.
Thank you. Okay, another red card.
We don't have any more questions, right? We just have a closing statement?
We're just going to go to closing, so you can make a 1 minute.
I would just say that, and this is a point I've made at other forums, that we all stand before you and we all say that we're for good things, and I think we all are. But the point needs to be made. I don't think it can be repeated enough that our national budget priorities are distorted by a foreign policy that's in the hands driven by military contractors. It soaks up a huge amount of our resources. It doesn't make us safer. It doesn't serve to make the lives of our servicemen and women better. Unless we tackle that, there will not be the resources. It's soaking up $800 billion of our resources. There will not be the resources for investments in transportation, for investments in drug treatment, all the things that as Democrats that we care about. And so we need to be honest about that, and we need to tackle that issue, or we will not get to where we need to be as a country.
Thank you. Now we are going to go to closing statements, and each candidate has 1 minute for a closing statement. And Vivian, you get to be first.
I'm asking for your support on June 26th because our slogan is, you know what she will do because you know what she's done. I have a record of accomplishment in my 13 years in the legislature that is a stellar record. I have lived in the district for 50 years. I have taught in the district for 35 years. But I want to give you a word of caution. You're going to get a lot of material coming to your homes. Be careful when you get that. Look at it very carefully. I've been seeing one that says that Planned Parenthood received funding from Suffolk County. I was on the board of Planned Parenthood. Planned Parenthood never received any funding from any legislator who served on the Suffolk County legislature. So be very careful. After Trump was elected, I was talking to someone, and I said, "Well, how could you stand his lies?" And she said, "Well, all politicians lie." Put us at a very high standard. Don't accept any lies from anyone who's running for office. Thank you. I hope I'll have your support on the 26th.
David?
Thank you. I'm the candidate in this primary that has both deep domestic and foreign policy experience. I know how to get stuff done in government. I will challenge Lee Zeldin on his failure to deliver for the district. But I want to say more than that. I want to say that this is a time where the Democratic Party needs to be fearless. And we have to stick to Democratic principles, or what the Democratic Party should embody. An economy that works for everyone, respect for other nations and other people, respect for the environment, and equal justice before the law. And I will articulate that message. I will stand on those points, and I will beat Lee Zeldin with your support. Join me June 26th, and we'll beat him. And we'll beat him in a way that not only is good for this district, but sends shockwaves across the country. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you, League of Women Voters.
Kate?
Okay, thank you to the League of Women Voters for hosting this event. And again, thank you to all of you who are here today. And that's why I think that, why I would like your support on June 26th is I do have a proven record also as a Suffolk County legislature for the 12 years. I've lived in a blue-collar district. I represented the 3rd Legislative District, which is more Republican, not unlike Congressional District 1, and I have the ability to touch those blue-collar voters. So with that, I want to work on those infrastructure projects which will create jobs. I want to work on our environment. I want to make sure that we bring those renewable energy projects which will also bring jobs to our communities. And so I ask you again, June 26th, I'm hoping you'll vote for me.
Thank you. Elaine? You get your chance at the end.
I'm running this race because I know what's possible. On all those years at Brookhaven National Lab, I got up excited every day for what discoveries the scientists could make and for what the technicians and trades could build with their steel-toed shoes and the hard hats. And that's how I feel this district is. It can be getting up excited for the future every day. My plan revolves around using our talents, our infrastructure, our expertise, and our urgent need for clean energy that will protect our environment, that allows us to grow food here, that allows us to have a booming tourist industry here, and that makes us want to be able to stay and raise our children here, and that makes us want our children to be able to stay here. That's why I'm excited to be running for you and asking for your support on June 26th.
Thank you. Perry?
This is an election in November that we win by painting Lee Zeldin to be the extremist that he is. And when we do that, we open up the center. And that's how we win as Democrats in CD1. We need that coalition. We need to be for our health care. We need to be for protecting the environment. We need to be for gun safety. Those are the progressive side. We also need to be for jobs. We need to be for restoring full deductibility of property taxes and state and local income taxes. And we need to be cognizant of Zeldin's connection to Donald Trump and make sure people understand that he's Trump's biggest enabler. And that's something people really are not going to want to keep going. And I'm the one of these candidates who can tie those two themes together, the progressive side and the business side. I've not been in government before, but that's an asset. So when you go to vote on June 26th, I ask you to come out and support me because I will beat Lee Zeldin in November. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's thank all of the candidates for their candor and enthusiasm. And I want to thank all of you for being a great audience, but now it's your turn. Get out there and vote.